Great. So fantastic. Thanks so much. Great concert. Really, really fantastic. I want to first. We can close those doors in the back. Are you kidding? And there's a little bit of an echo, strangely. Isn't there? Yeah.
Yes.
Other times there isn't, so I don't know. The first thing I wanted to talk about, well, first to mention for myself what Bridget referred to, that I've sort of happened because of this harpist, Marie-Pierre Langlamet. I wrote a piece, this is some years ago, for violin and harp, and then ended up writing another piece, and I think, what now, 5 pieces, and I've been very happy to have, on this side of the Atlantic, Bridget to play them so fantastically. And it's really been, it's been fun. It's sort of interesting. It's one of those things, too, where if it wasn't for these players, both for Bridget and Marie-Pierre, I might not have written for harp, but having done it and gotten over the considerable problems of writing for it, it's been really fun. And I'm sure you guys probably have the similar thing with playing with harp, right? Because it's interesting because it works a lot of, flute, viola, you'd often be playing with piano, and there's something very pleasing acoustically about working with harp, right? I mean, balance-wise and so on, it works well. But, we have this instrument. I was sitting here looking at it and thinking of, the way life forms evolve and take various turns through adaptation. I mean, that's sort of the history of the harp, right? Because the harp is a very old instrument, but this is the double action harp still, which is born in the 19th century, right? Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. I'm so glad you brought that up. So you might have noticed that I was moving these pedals or tap dancing during the concert because we actually we move pedals to manipulate the string. Sure. So basically, Jack has a fretboard. He's using his hands to create different pitches on the strings, but we're busy with our fingers plucking, and so we have to have another mechanism to change the pitch. So basically what you're looking at here is a set of open strings, okay? So it's a C major, C flat major scale going up the harp. So if it's just an open position. But what's really fun is this beautiful column is actually hiding an entire mechanism. So attached to the pedals below, you have a rod that comes up to the top of the harp, connects to these levers that actually push into the strings to shorten or lengthen the string by a half step. So I'll play the C string. They're color-coded so we don't get lost when we're playing. It happens. C string, C flat, C natural, C sharp. So you're right in that in the 19th century, the 2 piano makers actually kind of dueled to create the new system to accommodate chromaticism of the time. And so Pleyel and Erard, 2 piano makers, actually came up with different types of harps, and this one stuck. So.
Right, because of course, going back, it was a diatonic instrument. So if you think of a piano, it's equivalent of the white keys in the piano, and so all the other chromatic things that happen have to happen all with your feet. Which actually, you were saying, did you notice? I was struck. It's a testament to how her skill and grace in playing. I barely ever noticed a pedal change, because often you can, because it's pretty cumbersome, and you're doing a lot of them. And I have to say, for composer, it's really horrible too, because you have to think of all of them, which is you get used to, but they get used to correcting our errors of our ways too. So tell me a little bit about the. Carter too, while we're on harp, because here we get to hear a solo piece. Now it seems to have become, it's from a piece with oboe too, and I must say, I think I heard it once with oboe, but then I've heard it many times with harp. I sense harpists have taken over that movement. Yeah.
It's really one of our best solo pieces that we have because of what it demands of you and just the way Carter heard color. And once again, he worked with a living harpist, Carlos Salcedo.
Really?
In the 1900s, yes.
He's sort of like king of a lot of harp techniques.
Exactly. He's documented a lot of extended techniques on the harp, and he was quite a showman, actually, and so you can sense that in the way Carter writes his piece. It's really fantastic, and to me it feels very showy and big and out. So harpists have been playing this a lot. It's actually on competition lists now, and it was written in 1992, and because of his relationship with Ursula and Heinz Holliger, the oboist and harpist, he actually has also written a lot for the duo. So what's really fun about that piece is you didn't miss a lot of oboe playing in that movement. There are 2 interjections where the oboe just plays these loud, like open fifths in response to the harp twice in that piece to kind of stamp and set down what the harmony is. So the last time I played it was with oboe, and I missed hearing those notes tonight.
And it's called barilage, which is a term from string playing, from actually, what's he referring to for the harp? Or do you want actually first tell us what barilage in string playing is just when you're crossing strings, right? Playing things between strings. The Bach. Yeah. Yeah. And so what's he referring to?
So he's basically saying same pitch, two strings, and so he uses enharmonic doublings. B sharp is the same thing as C to create these tremolo or bispigliando, creating the same pitch, but we're using two strings, so we can do it very quickly. And so he plays with that, and he also uses harmonics to double certain pitches. So he basically takes one pitch and plays with it in every single colorway he can imagine.
You can tell she's a harpist because she uses the word bispigliando as if you knew what she was talking about. Which is a technique of sort of just rustling some of those beautiful rustling sounds where it's sort of you can't quite differentiate what's going on. That's very characteristic of the harp, which again probably goes back to Sonata or something, I'd imagine, right? Yeah. And then the Fedeli piece. Tell me a little bit about that, Julietta. Either one of you.
I'll start us off. So Fedeli has worked at IRCAM for many years, and he's...
IRCAM is in Paris, the sort of experimental music started by Boulez, and with a lot of, I mean, he's sort of in the school of spectral composers, right?
Yes. So I think he has this incredible balance of creating texture that's just metronomic with kind of flourishes playing around it to kind of create this sense of one palette, where Julietta was kind of doing this melisma around it, and then we were kind of playing with different roles throughout the piece in that way.
Well, there's not much to add to that, absolutely. It was just a very colorful, light piece, and I think it's interesting. He comes from the Italian school, but this is so light and very, very French, and I just really appreciated the texture and the really light colors that he achieved. So it's a really great piece.
Have you two worked together a bunch, by the way? Or?
We have, actually. We've known each other for, should we say how long? We were
Sure.
schoolmates, and we've played together for about 10 years, I think.
10 years at least.
That's great, because there's quite a bit of repertoire share with flute and
Quite a bit.
harp. Yeah. That's great. And then my piece. Let's see. Well, what to say about that? What was it like? I have to tell you too. Yesterday when we did the projections, actually, see, my idea originally was to also have a clock ticking, and then I decided not to but the thing is, that's why I knew that they were so close, because of course they were occasionally, it felt so great when they were exactly, like they started playing, and the first one was exactly 60 seconds. You're saying, how did they do that? But then the other ones were like, a second or two, and then you're already spoiled, and at that point I decided. And was that making you nervous at the fact that I asked for that? Because I realized in a way it's not a good musical motivating thing.
Yeah, I found myself in the run-through yesterday thinking in my head, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, trying to get exactly 60. But
He's a living metronome, though. I mean, his 60 and 120. What's great is that,
Very
Sebastian, you crafted these tempi that allowed us to, if we really follow them perfectly, it would be a minute, and there's something powerful about that.
Right, but close to a minute is absolutely fine. Yeah.
It's absolutely a wonderful concept, though, because we don't usually think about the time passing throughout a piece. So, I mean, as musicians, and I just love how that was a thread throughout the entire piece.
Right, and does it feel for you too like very different lengths, even despite they're all a minute? Subjectively, they sort of take various different times,
does.
right?
yeah, and especially I think the slowest ones, it felt like they just passed so quickly, and the fast ones were just sitting there, trying to get all that information in. So I think maybe the number of notes that goes through through our fingers when we play might have something to do.
That certainly
with
has
it,
something
yeah.
to do with it. I'm sure. Other things. I mean, the one thing I was doing is later on, they themselves are more fragmentary, so you don't get to the point of completion and have the sense full of arc. Instead, you're sort of led onward, and they sort of feel sort of shorter as a result, I think, and connect to each other more. Anyway, but beautiful performance. It was really wonderful. And the Dognani piece. Tell me about that. I actually don't know that piece. And I know it's from the notes. It's actually I assume it's played a lot.
It's actually not.
Oh, okay. But
It's
you
not
said it was
played-
one of his more important pieces.
It's one of the more important pieces. It's a piece that's showing up in many competitions now due to its virtuosity. But it was the last piece that he wrote, and it's only been recorded once. Just a very complex piece, trying to figure out where the line is in every single variation. It's just, I think it's really wonderful.
Right, it's a sort of sustained, compared to other unaccompanied flute pieces, sort of sustained melodic sort of
Yes.
thing that you have to take it through. So is that sort of the
Yes.
hardest thing, making the whole arc?
Making the arc, because it does seem so disjointed in some ways. It doesn't really seem connected. But finding the through line, finding the thread throughout the piece is the challenge.
But you're saying it is a variations pretty...
Yes,
Yeah.
well, the Passacaglia hopefully was evident throughout every single variation. Yeah, but it is basically theme and variations based on the Passacaglia.
Great. And then I have Jack. I had him bring out his viola here. Do you know why? Because for the Sciarrino, I thought it'd be because it's quite a. I've actually never heard this piece. It sounds great, but there's a violin piece too called Six Caprices, which is about 25 minutes long probably, and it's all harmonics. And this is you played two of the three.
Two of the three.
Yeah,
Yep.
three. Could you just sort of demonstrate and sort of how it all works?
Yeah.
for us?
So maybe. So we have our open strings, which sounds like that, and within that vibrating string is a whole series of overtones, and so we touch the strings very lightly on the nodes of where the string vibrates to bring out these overtones. So we can bring out the whole spectral series from one sound. So. All the way up there. So whenever you hear the open string, you're actually hearing the combination of all of those tones together. And since we can do it on, we can touch any node and that'll happen, Sciarrino uses it down in kind of a more traditional position. And so we can
Right.
make all these crazy sounds.
Because what he was saying there is too that it divides a string in however many numbers you can divide in half, in 3, 4, 5, 6, and every one, when you divide it into 7 places, there are 7 nodes that get you the same. The other thing he didn't mention, though, is that they're very hard to get. You have to be very precise, and the bow pressure has to be just right, much more than if you're playing a normal note. On the other hand, it obviously, I mean, the piece is just so well written because it makes this effervescent sound when it's just the whole thing. And the second movement, those sort of glissandi, those sort of, what's going on there?
So
I'm curious by the way about this. Yeah.
one of my teachers jokingly called it, it's when you step on a cat's tail, that's the sound that you're going to get.
You're right.
It's, and we use the harmonic fingering, but we play
Excessive
with a
bow
lot
pressure.
of pressure.
Yeah.
And we just kind of, shake our hands so it's.
Oh, and the apparent gliss is sort of just the random, I mean, because they seem to go in directions more.
Yeah. So when we're doing it at high speed, he writes for it every time to be kind of this
Right.
this sound, but since the piece goes so fast, you don't actually have time to do it.
You
So
make a gesture in one direction. Right. Great. Yeah, no, bravo, really beautiful. And the Debussy, of course, we wouldn't be having this conversation in a way if it wasn't for the Debussy, because it's the Debussy that originally brought this combination together. And I mean, do any of you know? I mean, highly unusual that time. I don't think any precedent. Do you would probably know more than I would about that.
They actually, I think he was the first to write for this combination.
Right, and it's stayed with us. Yeah.
yeah. And originally, actually, he wanted to write the piece for harp, viola, and oboe. And I have to say, hopefully there's no oboist, but thank God he didn't, because the flute is so perfect in this kind of arrangement, and I think an oboe might have really changed the character of the piece. So.
Exactly. Again, if it was oboe, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. But it did have this long lineage because it's a very beautiful piece and it's been played, and then people would, I think what happens is composers today then get asked to write, there are these certain pieces that you get asked to write companion pieces for, and this is one of them that I think a lot of composers have written for. And anything else you'd like to say about it? It's a beautiful, beautiful piece, very interesting piece. Yeah,
Go for it.
maybe, yeah.
I just wanted to say I thought it was really interesting, your piece and the Debussy, because Debussy is kind of a composer who's well known for not having a very metric time, and he really stretches the time and changes it so it's a very organic feeling of time. And your piece really, especially when we did it with the clock, we really felt that kind of difference between the metronome and our own personal sense of time. And I thought that was an interesting pairing.
I think it's also important to mention that Debussy really created a new color palette in the way he blended the instruments together, and it's a real challenge and delight for us to do that. So instead of a flute and harp, you have a flute or the viola with the flute together. And I feel like your piece, really the crafting of those dynamics and colors were so complementary that it's really pleasing as a performer to experience that on stage in like complete silence. So that was a real treat.
Great. Any questions from any of you? First.
I want to know if you started out with 15 words and made the sounds, or if you...
No, yeah, somebody else asked me that. I mean, because there'd be some pieces where I might have, but no, for this, because those words actually, those were really, they're just what I tell the musicians of how I want it to sound. So they're like marking adagio afterwards. So in a sense, I didn't have the word, although I had sort of the feel before, and then I just thought of the word that would suit that feel. And some of them were, as you see, sort of, they were two because it alternated between two things. I wanted you to know there's a chorale in this thing that also has the material for gesture. So yes, it definitely, the words came all later. Yeah, good question. It's been a number of years, and both I can say were 100% positive experience. And there's always, as a composer, you get used to it. It's much better to go with the flow and let each group bring their own things with them. And it was great working with you guys. Bridget and I have worked together many times before. Jack and Julietta, this is their first time, but it's totally fun. I don't know, how is it to work with? Maybe they have something else to say. It's very fun for a composer too, because you get to fine-tune things, timbre, and all these players. I mean, stuff you wouldn't even be aware of, the amount of control of sonority and so on. And so it's very fun to have a group that you can shape that with at will, and it's clearly something you think about, right? Thank you. Yes, I had David release it out. No, yeah, in this season, particularly kind of unusual to find. Maybe it's been living here or something. Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
I wondered if the performers had the same conception of which were the fastest and which were the slowest of the 15 minutes.
If we had a conception of that?
The similar conception, yeah. My guess is yes, because the fast ones are hard, and they're thinking, "Wow, I'm only halfway through." It's like, or not. I don't know.
Well, for me, the fast ones felt a little bit longer, just because, I mean, well, there was a lot more to play, and so we were quite a bit more focused. But they just felt a lot longer than the slower ones, for some reason.
And I think it's also interesting that at the beginning of the piece, for me, a second feels really long. Feels like a slow tempo, you know. But by the end of the piece, I'm like, this is so fast. This can't be 60. Yeah.
I wonder what you were thinking of when you did the gesture, when you wrote the gesture. The reason I say that is because I do art, and while it was on, I was bored. And I wondered what you meant by how you conceived of gesture, or how you conceived of doing that thing they call it a gesture.
Yeah, I mean, of course, because I had something very specific in mind. It's interesting you asked that, but gesture in general, using the word gesture in terms of music. There's a lot of music we refer to as gestural music, so indeed it would be not unlike the idea of brushstroke and so on. But in this case, for me, I was actually thinking something else. A mockingbird. I've always been fascinated with mockingbirds. Are there mockingbirds around here? Yeah, yeah. And so they tend to do this exact sort of thing. They have groups of 2 or 3, they repeat some little gesture. And so it's basically just like, it's not a transcription of a it's my imagination of a mockingbird, but it definitely came from a mockingbird. But I called it gestural because then the idea was the 3 players together always made some sort of gesture composite thing. So. I guess in the background, 15 was about right, and of course then it brings up the 15 minutes of fame of Andy Warhol, which we all have in our mind, right? So I mean, that's why I chose it, but also because it was about the right length. Yeah. Like if I were doing each one of an hour, I probably wouldn't have chose 15. Right? So, anybody else? Okay, last question from Juliet.
Did you ever get frustrated with your own concept? The fact that there were so many ideas, I felt, that did you ever kind of think, oh, damn it, I'm going to write 2 minutes, or
Well,
was it sort of, I know the material spreads, but were there any moments when you really felt you had to kind of cut off, or I should say?
not really, except because I knew later, I mean, I know what you're saying, so it has in a sense, he's asking sort of a question too of sort of just discipline with the idea, but because I was focused on the idea of, yes, later, basically things break down and I repeat stuff and you sort of have something stop and it's continued later. So I knew I was going to get to do that later. So now, of course, I don't really recall if there was some place where I really could have kept going, but I'm used to, like, time is of the essence. I mean, I often get rid of stuff as much. I'm used to culling things down and shortening stuff, so it didn't feel that different, really, particularly because I was starting with that plan at the beginning, so I don't think I felt cramped. So, anybody else? No. Well, thank you very much. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming. See you soon.
Thank you.